Hello and welcome back to Narrative Timbre. I'm Chris Morgan of The Lost Signals. You're probably on our channel, and if you've watched any of our podcasts since the lockdown, pandemic, whatever, you should recognize this room. I would give a studio tour, but it's a bit of a shithole because I am working on my first solo effort. It's going to be an EP, and it's going to be under my synthwave pseudonym of Morgatsu. It was suggested to me by Steve-O and Scott, and them plus Beth kind of did a committee thing and helped me with the name. Basically, yeah, you need a synthwave name, and there's so many Chris Morgans out there. So yeah, so I'm working on it. This place is a shithole, and I was the other day I was sitting here thinking about how I got here. You know, I'm to that point of the record where you're mixing things down, you're listening to things 100 times, you're going back and punching in bass, guitar, modifying the keyboards, whatever. And you know, I started listening to what I did and thought about like how the hell I got here. So this episode's called How the Fuck I Got Here. The 3 albums that changed my life. Well, there's more than that actually, but I'm going to start from the beginning. So obviously, as the t-shirt says, I was born in 1970. I got to see Star Wars in the theater in May 1977. Back then, there were no video stores, no digital downloads. And so a movie would stay in the theater for like years, whatever, as long as it made money. You know, it's like nowadays, as long as it makes money. But I went to see Star Wars and probably saw it at least a dozen times over the 12, 18, 24 months it was in the theater. And I got this, shortly thereafter. It's one of my first records, my first like adult record. John Williams' Star Wars score. This is my actual original one. As you can see, it's beaten up. And we have a lovely little gatefold. And I think I have long since lost the poster that came in with it. So the reason this stuck with me so much, growing up, when it came to music, aside from the Beatles, Rolling Stones, issues there were in my house, which I'll get to later. My mom's a Beatles fan. My dad's a Stones fan. I love them both. My mom and I both think Harrison's the best Beatle. But a lot of my upbringing involved classical music. I didn't really get a true appreciation for it, nor did I get a true appreciation for opera until I went to college and really studied this. But the thing that's great about Star Wars, this soundtrack, and what blew me away was one time I was in the car. My uncle had an 8-track cassette player in his car, box of 8-track cassettes. Look them up online; they're huge. And you know, driving around with him, I got introduced to like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, and you know, so going anywhere with him was like, yay, what music are we listening to? So there was one time we were in the car, long drive. My dad, my uncle was driving, my dad was there, and I was lying down in the back seat. And we put this in, and I was able to play the entire movie in my head as I was listening to it. And it occurred to me then how much music there was in Star Wars. I mean, now, you know, now when we talk about like classical music, there's always these impressionist composers and romantic composers that really influenced Williams, and where you can actually use music to paint pictures or to create scenes. Great example of it is Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. Williams was really influenced, especially by Wagner, Gustav Holst, Camille Saint-Saëns, Sergei Prokofiev. And I mean, if memory serves, even the Jawa theme is like a riff on Peter and the Wolf. Um, so I, there's all these connections he drew um, to what happened in the film based upon the themes, or as you know, or leitmotifs is what we call them. So, like, say you have the Force theme, okay? So every time that theme is played, there's usually a scene of contemplation. You know, it goes hand in hand with Luke, but like, you know, later on in the series during Empire Strikes Back, when Luke contacts Leia, you know, hanging from Cloud City, that comes out. That is the Force theme. That actually, you know, it's played a lot, and it's very, you know, there's variations of it in there, and it's like these little themes like that. He uses a lot. There's you know, the Imperial March from Empire Strikes Back's a theme. He uses these things, and um it really actually gives your mind something to grasp onto. So when you hear that, it draws you to a certain scene. I mean, listen to me right now. I'm telling you right now a couple of instances of where it's played. Um, and it's stuff like that that really I would learn later in life that really was what allowed me to pluck this information, you know, to recall it and to actually play the movie out in my brain. And it really, if you go back and watch it, and I'm going to put the link down to our review of Star Wars. Um, because that's it's a fun show anyway. Looking back on Star Wars, you know, I'm hard pressed to find a scene that doesn't have music in it. So it really was the first thing that introduced me to the true narrative structure of music. Now, again, later in life, I'd learn this is not atypical. I'd learn a little more about John Williams' influences, and it kind of brought everything together. But as a 7, 8 year old, hearing this for the first time, being able to actually listen to it and be able to play the movie in my head as I was listening to it was a miraculous thing. And just FYI, CD and digital download, you can get the entirety of the music. This is only a 2 disc set, so there wasn't even the all the music that was in the theater in the movie rather. So you can now get it, and I highly recommend it. So so yeah, if you've watched any of our shows for like any, you know, I'm a Trekkie. Been a Trekkie since 1973. Big sci-fi fan, so loved Star Wars. 2 years later, we got the Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, and Jerry Goldsmith gave me what is probably it is a second album, landmark album for me, but this is without question the greatest score ever. It's my personal favorite score. I, you know, Jerry Goldsmith is definitely my favorite film composer. I mean, I love Williams. Don't get me wrong. I love the first trilogy uh, of Star Wars, but you know, I was a Star Trek fan, and um, the Jerry Goldsmith brought something very new to this. The movie came out in December 1979, so I was 9. So by the time I got my grubby little hands on this, I was probably 10. So 10-year-old me's listening to this. And again, he does use themes. I mean, most composers, if you know, use certain things, give you certain indicators to certain themes, certain scenes, certain characters, certain locations. But what I got from this, whereas I got the leitmotif thing from Williams, what I got from this is to kind of come out of the box a little. Williams was much more rooted in his classical origins. Yeah, you've got some soundtracks of him like Close Encounters, where he does get a little atonal, does get a little electronic, but you know, Goldsmith was the first one I knew who really embraced the experimental, the electronic side of things. I mean, he had just come off of like the Omen and Logan's Run, and whereas the Omen was a little more traditional, Logan's Run was very much an electronic album. You know, a lot of stuff like early synth stuff that was be slightly reminiscent of maybe Wendy Carlos. around the time Jean-Michel Jarre released Oxygen. I believe Tangerine Dream was out there. So synthesizers were really coming into the mainstream, and electronic music was really in its infancy, ready to grow even more when we got into the 80s. So yeah, having Goldsmith really bring in some additional elements and to kind of rethink things. Like, for example, all right, the movie starts off with an overture, which is something you don't see anymore, literally, where the screen's blank and you play 3.5 minutes of music. You introduce a theme. You have the opening credits for the motion picture. It was the what you would now know as the Next Generation theme, that dun da 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 da, and what came next was you saw this like blue cloud and there's this crash and this weird noise, and then you got the strings coming in. You hear some castanets and some wood blocks that have a little reverb on them, so they give you like this kind of rough and tumble feeling. You had three Klingon warships heading towards you, and then he introduced the Klingon theme. And funny enough, that Klingon theme later on in the Next Generation movies, when Worf makes his introduction, for those of you who don't know, Worf from the Next Generation, first Klingon officer, every time he makes his introduction in these movies, Goldsmith throws that theme in there. So that's a Klingon theme. But the antagonist for the movie is this alien cloud, aforementioned, called V'ger, and it's a machine inside of a cloud. And in the early 1970s, there was this instrument called the blaster beam that was invented by John Lazelle. And for this movie, interestingly enough, a former child star who appeared in 2 episodes of the original series, Craig Huxley, modified the version of this thing called the blaster beam. And I will, at the bottom, you should see a link of Huxley demonstrating this. But for the point of this, imagine this guitar is like 12, 14 feet of like industrial wire or whatever. And this plexiglass slide is aluminum. Let's just say it's a big hunk of aluminum. And when the V'ger cloud comes in, instead of having a theme, it has an actual sound. So you'll get a crash like that. That's kind of like what a blaster beam does. And it was really unique for me, as at 10 years old. You come out with these 2 orchestral things, and then you get into this Klingon battle theme where you're introduced to this instrument that I did not know about until like about 10 years ago, what the fuck that was. These reverbed wood percussion with these strings and that battle cry, which is reminiscent of like the war horns and so forth. So it was a really, really hit piece. Really blew me away, this Klingon battle score. And once again, like with Star Wars, you can get this download and on CD with the entirety of the music. Again, there's so much music in this movie. In a very underrated movie. It's my second favorite Star Trek film, and I will defend it to my dying day. But there's really an incredible amount of music in this, and I highly recommend listening to it. This really took me outside of the box. So let's fast forward a couple years to high school, and funny thing is, when I was in middle school growing up, I started to play guitar. And because I was listening to a lot of like, Ozzy and Black Sabbath. And while I still listen to Ozzy and Black Sabbath, and I still have an affinity for Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and an appreciation for AC/DC, these weren't things I brought to the party. Like my mom brought the Beatles and Cat Stevens. My dad brought the Rolling Stones and the Doors. My uncle and my dad brought classical music in. My friends, they brought in, this metal, but I didn't have anything that I brought to the party. And I'm actually one day in my room, listening to a local radio station, hanging up this Judas Priest tapestry that I bought. And this song came on called Hold Me Now, which brings me to the third and the third most important record in my upbringing, Thompson Twins, Into the Gap. This record really paved the way for electronic music for me, got me playing the keyboards, piano, synth, um, and it's really funny. If you take these three records, you have, traditional classical, and then you bring in Goldsmith, where he brings in a lot of electronic music, and then here we go, full electronic pop music. And the great thing about this album is, not only is it like an electronic new wave album, um, electronic pop new wave, whatever they were calling it at the time, I don't even remember. Um, there's other songs in it, such as "You Take Me Up," that uses harmonicas and melodicas. So, in this, I learned in Alana Curry, the percussionist, obviously plays a lot of, like, timbales, um, and the marimba, the xylophone. So here we had this electro pop trio, and you had, like, again, as with Goldsmith, you had like traditional percussion intermixed in that. You had traditional, like wind instruments. Well, not really, but melodicas and harmonicas, that kind of thing. And these things integrated themselves in really well. And one of the things a couple years ago, we did Ian, Scott, and I did a show on synthwave music. And at the time, I was like, "What the hell, synthwave?" And they started playing, what it is. I'm like, "Oh, this is like electronic music from the '80s. That's what you're calling it now?" Because to me, a synthwave is like a sine wave or something. So one of the things that to me defined electronic music is it is not a hard and steady rule. This is not for everything, every piece of electronic music. But one of the things I always got from electronic music was this sequence, a repeating pattern. And the first single off, or sorry, the first track on this album, which was their second single, was a piece called Doctor Doctor. And there's this little keyboard piece that repeats throughout the song. And that's repeated throughout the song. And I always thought that was really, really interesting. And going back and listening to their other stuff, there are things like that, in very, especially in the earlier synth stuff, that are more heavy synth. And grow then, again, getting older, going back and listening to Jean-Michel Jarre, um, and a lot of the electronic musics of the time since then, there is always some kind of repeating pattern. So it really did introduce me a lot to some of the tropes of electronic music, which I have integrated into my new record. There's a song, and I'll play. I'll exit with an excerpt from it that kind of combines all these things, because it's called "Along the Landscape." So is definitely inspired by a trip I took across country with a couple buddies of mine. I do have a repeating pattern in it, or a repeating sequence that I use with an arpeggiator. I do modulate it a little, so it does go with the whatever I change chords. But the great thing is when you have something that repeats like that, you can change what's playing over it, and you can kind of change the structure on it. So maybe you have a D chord, but you keep the D down here, and you change what's happening up there, and that could give it a G or a B minor, or sorry, a B flat chord, or um, something like that. There's guitar in it. There's a couple things where I'm just doing it to make sounds. So right off the bat, in one piece, I kind of combined a lot of stuff that I learned. And again, I'll lead out playing an excerpt from it. It's the first sneak peek. I will come back and talk about that probably. There will probably be more how the fuck I got here, talking about some influences and how they affected me, how they affected the music I do. But right now, I'm in the process of getting the shit ready to go. I'm about less than a month away. It's now March 24th. I'll probably they're premiering this on the 26th. So my record's going to is going to be releasing on 420. So that's it. So Star Wars by John Williams, Star Trek the Motion Picture by Jerry Goldsmith, and I'm going to hold it up right. Yep. And Thompson Twins, Into the Gap. I highly recommend listening to all of these. And leave in the comments what things inspired you. And if you've made it this long, thank you so much for listening. I hope to return. I've been Chris Morgan here, Narrative Timbre, Lost Signals, and my alias is Margetsu. Peace and long life, live long and prosper. See you later.